The woman in my back seat knew my name before I told her. That wasn't the part that frightened me. What frightened me was what she said next. She leaned forward between the two front seats, smiled at me through the rearview mirror, and quietly asked, "You still take the same route home after your last passenger, don't you?" I remember looking at the clock. 2:17 a.m. I had been driving a night taxi for almost 6 years, so I was used to strange passengers. At that hour, people got into your car carrying all kinds of problems. Some were drunk, some were lonely, and some talked constantly because silence made them uncomfortable. This woman didn't seem to be any of those things. She looked to be in her late 20s, with dark hair tucked behind one ear and a neat black coat over an expensive-looking dress. She was calm, well-spoken, and completely comfortable sitting alone in a taxi at 2 in the morning. She had booked the taxi from outside a hotel on the edge of town. The booking name was Emily. "Where to?" I asked. She gave me an address about 15 minutes away. Then she said, "Could you take the long way?" I glanced at her in the mirror. "It's more expensive." "I know." She smiled and settled back into the seat. I pulled away from the hotel. Rain tapped softly against the windscreen, and the streets were almost empty. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Emily said, "You've been working nights for a long time." I looked at her in the mirror. "Yeah. You probably know the city better at 2 in the morning than you do during the day." "Probably." She smiled. "That must be useful." I thought she was flirting with me. Looking back, I think she was measuring me. A few minutes later, she asked what time I normally finished work. "Usually around 3. "And then you go straight home?" "Most nights." "Do you live far from the city?" I looked at her again. Why all the questions? She laughed softly. "Sorry, I'm just making conversation." Then she asked whether I lived alone. That one made me uncomfortable. "Why?" She looked out of the window. "You don't have to answer." I didn't. For the next few minutes, she said nothing. Then she gave me the address. When we arrived, I immediately knew something was wrong. There was no hotel, no apartment building, just a large detached house at the end of a quiet road. I stopped outside. "This is the address you gave me." "I know." She stared through the windscreen at the house. She didn't seem surprised to be there. She seemed to be preparing herself. After several seconds, she turned toward me. "I need you to do something strange." I waited. "My boyfriend is inside. I don't want him to see me arrive." She paused. "Could you wait around the corner?" I frowned. "I can't wait forever." 5 minutes. She reached into her handbag and took out 20 pounds. "Please." I should have refused. Instead, I took the money. I drove around the corner and switched off the engine. Emily opened the rear door. Before getting out, she leaned down slightly and looked at me. "Whatever happens, don't come looking for me." I smiled because I thought she was being dramatic. "Okay." She closed the door and walked toward the house. I watched her disappear around the corner. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I checked the time. I was about to leave when I called the number attached to the booking. It rang once. Then a woman's voice answered. "Leave." The line went dead. I stared at my phone. Before I could decide what to do, I saw Emily walking toward me. She was moving quickly. Her hair was wet. Her breathing was faster than before. She opened the rear door, got inside, and said, "Drive." I looked at her in the mirror. "What happened?" "Nothing." "You don't look fine." "I'm fine." "Did your boyfriend?" "Just drive." There was something in her voice that stopped me asking anything else. She gave me another address. This one was across town. For the rest of the journey, she barely spoke. When we stopped outside a small block of flats, she paid me in cash. Before getting out, she looked at me for several seconds. Then she said, "You've been very kind tonight." I smiled. "It's my job." She shook her head. "No." She opened the door. "It wasn't." Then she disappeared inside the building. I watched her go. I never saw her again. At least, that's what I thought. At 6:40 the next morning, 2 police officers were standing outside my house. One of them asked whether I had driven a woman to a house near the old railway line during the night. I immediately thought of Emily. I said yes. The officer asked me what time I had arrived. I told him. Then he asked whether I had entered the house. No. He looked at his colleague. Then he said, "A man has been found dead inside." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. They asked about the woman. I told them everything. The hotel, the address, the waiting, the phone call, the second journey. They took my taxi for examination. They checked the seats, the door handles, the floor, and the boot. Then they removed the dashcam memory card. My dashcam showed almost everything. It showed Emily getting into my taxi. It showed the journey to the house. It showed her getting out. It showed me driving around the corner. It showed her getting back in. And it showed me leaving. There was no footage of me entering the house. There was no footage of me returning to it. Nothing showed me anywhere near the victim. After several hours, the police let me go. I thought I had been lucky. 3 days later, my taxi company called. A passenger had made a serious complaint against me. She claimed that I had followed her after dropping her off. The complaint contained my full name, my taxi registration number, the color and model of my car, and the exact street where I lived. I knew immediately who had made it. Emily. The police returned that afternoon. This time, the questions felt different. One officer asked, "Why would she accuse you of following her?" "I don't know." He studied me for a moment. Then he placed a photograph on my kitchen table. It showed me standing beside my taxi outside my house. The photograph had been taken the morning after the murder. I stared at it. Then he placed another photograph beside it. This one showed me leaving my house 2 days earlier. Then another, me returning from work. Then another, my taxi parked outside my home. The photographs had been taken from different positions, different distances, different days. Someone had been watching me. For the first time, I understood that the taxi journey hadn't been the beginning of something. It had been the middle. "Why me?" I asked. The officer didn't answer. Instead, he asked whether I had ever met Emily before that night. I said no. He asked whether I had ever seen her near my home. Again, I said no. Then he asked something that made my stomach tighten. "Does anyone know your normal working hours?" I thought about it. My taxi company knew. My regular customers knew roughly when I worked. And every night, my taxi was visible on the road. My registration number was printed on the vehicle. My first name appeared on the booking system. I suddenly understood why Emily had asked so many questions. She wasn't getting to know me. She was confirming information she already had. 2 weeks later, the police found Emily. She hadn't fled the country. She hadn't changed her appearance. She had been living under her real name in a rented flat less than 3 miles from my house. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. Why would someone planning to disappear stay so close? The answer was hidden inside the flat. Emily had been preparing for months. The murdered man had been her boyfriend. Their relationship had become controlling, and she had been secretly moving money, collecting documents, and preparing another place to live. But she hadn't simply wanted to escape him. She wanted to make sure that, after his death, nobody would look for her. So she created a second story. In that story, she was frightened. She was being followed. She was trying to escape. And the last person she trusted was a taxi driver who knew where she lived. Me. She had created messages on a second phone that made it appear she was afraid of me. She had made the complaint against me. She had even arranged for photographs of me to exist so that, when the police started investigating her disappearance, I would look like the obvious explanation. But there was a problem. The police discovered that the man had already been dead before Emily entered my taxi. I hadn't been involved in the murder at all. She didn't need me to help kill him. She needed me to prove that she had been alive after his death. And that was when the real purpose of the journey became clear. The taxi booking created a timestamp. My dashcam created a record of her leaving the house alive. I became the last independent person who could confirm that she existed after the murder. Then she disappeared. The accusation against me would give the police a reason to examine my life instead of hers. It was clever, almost too clever. But there was still one question I couldn't stop thinking about. How had she known so much about me before she ever entered my taxi? The answer came from her phone. The police found photographs of my car, photographs of my house, photographs of the street where I lived, photographs of me leaving for work, photographs of me returning home. Then they found one that made me physically sick. It showed me asleep in my bedroom. The photograph had been taken through my upstairs window. The curtains were open. Beneath the photograph was a note Emily had written to herself. "He never closes the curtains." I stared at the photograph for a long time. Then I noticed the date. 11 days before I ever met her. That meant she had been watching me before she booked the taxi, before the hotel, before the first conversation, before I even knew her name. I asked the detective why she had chosen me. He said they were still trying to understand that. Then he showed me something else. A list. My name was written at the top. Underneath it were notes about my working hours, my usual route home, the time I normally parked outside my house, and the days I usually worked. There were several other names underneath mine. People I had never heard of. I asked what they were. The detective didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "We're looking into that." I didn't understand what he meant until they found the notebook. Emily had been studying several people. Taxi drivers, delivery drivers, security guards, people who worked at night, people whose routines were predictable, people whose jobs made their movements easy to track. I had not been special. I had simply been the best candidate. That realization stayed with me. She hadn't chosen me because she knew me. She chose me because she didn't. I was predictable. I was visible. I worked alone. And, most importantly, I had no reason to remember her. To me, she was just another passenger. To her, I was a useful piece of evidence. I stopped driving nights after that. I moved house. I changed my number. I replaced my curtains. I stopped telling strangers where I worked. For several months, things were quiet. Eventually, I convinced myself that it was over. Then, almost a year later, I woke up at 2:17 in the morning. I don't know why. The room was completely dark. I reached for my phone. There was one new photograph. No name, no number, just the image. I opened it. It was my bedroom, my bed. I never found out who sent those messages. The police investigated. They checked the window. They checked the street. They checked my phone. They found nothing. No camera. No footprints. No evidence that anyone had been outside. Eventually, they told me it was probably someone trying to frighten me. Maybe it was. But there is one thing I have never been able to explain. The photograph had been taken from the same angle as the photograph Emily had taken almost a year earlier. The same window. The same room. The same view of my bed. And Emily was already in prison. So sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I think about that first conversation. The way she knew my name. The way she knew my route home. The way she knew what time I finished work. And I remember what I thought at the time. I thought she had spent 15 minutes sitting behind me, asking questions and learning things about my life. I was wrong. She already knew everything. The journey wasn't when she found me. It wasn't when she decided to frame me. It wasn't even when she decided to use me. By the time Emily opened the rear door of my taxi, that decision had already been made. She had been watching me for 11 days. She had studied my routine. She had photographed my house. She had learned when I slept. She knew which route I took home. And that night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., she wasn't getting into my taxi to escape her boyfriend. She was getting into my taxi to make sure I was the man she had been watching. The last thing she said to me before disappearing was, "You've been very kind tonight." At the time, I thought she was thanking me for the ride. Now I understand what she meant. She wasn't thanking me for helping her. She was thanking me for being exactly who she needed me to be. Because the taxi ride wasn't the beginning of her plan. It was the final test. And I passed.